Hello and welcome to all our distinguished guests and friends who have gathered here today from all over the world for this virtual launch of the book, The Pearl Canopy. This is probably the first time we are organizing a book launch online through online media. However, in these changing, unprecedented times, it gives us immense joy to be able to put together such a significant event uniting friends across different time zones. Throughout this webinar, please feel free to send in your comments and thoughts in the chat box provided. To begin with, a brief introduction about the Institute and the event today. From the very inception in 1982, the Institute of Asian Studies is concentrating on the promotion of Tamil studies at the international level with a broader Asian perspective. It is collaborating with various institutions and individual scholars of many countries, including Japan, China, Korea, Thailand, Malaysia, Myanmar, Hong Kong, and Singapore in Asia, England, Germany, France, Czech Republic, and other European countries, Scandinavian countries such as Sweden, Poland, Norway, African countries like South Africa, Senegal, a few Gulf countries, islands of the Indian Ocean such as Seychelles, Mauritius, and Reunion, and many states of North America and Canada. The Institute has brought out nearly 200 books, connected mainly on Tamil studies, with the participation of such international scholars. Preparation of basic source material for advanced Tamil research at the global level in a common lingua franca, namely English, is one of the main activities of the Institute from its very inception. Preparation of encyclopedias, descriptive catalogs, multilingual dictionaries, and translation of Tamil classics into English and other languages are some of the major activities of this center. We undertake translation of Tamil classics with the collaboration of native and foreign scholars. Under this scheme of translation of Tamil classics, the Institute of Asian Studies has brought out more than 60 rare books. It has organized many international conferences in New York, Malaysia, Mauritius, and Liverpool, and few lecture come exhibition programs in South Korea, Hong Kong, China, and other countries. Nearly 20 scholars from various countries have successfully completed their PhD programs through this institute on various areas of research with interdisciplinary approach focusing on various aspects of Tamilology. It has granted academic affiliations to a number of American scholars of Tamilology through the American Institute of Asian Studies. It has also published the scholarly works of many American Tamil scholars, including Professor Michael Rabe, Professor John A. Love, Mr. Patrick Harrington, Professor David C. Buck, and others. The other outstanding work of foreign scholars published by this institute include the study of 8 anthologies by Dr. John Marr from England, a word index of Sangam literature by 2 German scholars, namely Professor Thomas Martin and Dr. Thomas Lehmann, Bodhidharma by the Japanese professor Sutomu Kambe, Learn Japanese by Dr. Yuko Fukuroe, and the 5 scholarly works on different topics by the most reputed Tamil scholar, Professor Kamal B. Swelabil from the Czech Republic. Following the excellent translation of Kuravanji in Kutralam, today we are releasing another nice English version of Tamil classic Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, belonging to the 8th century AD, under the title The Pearl Canopy. This poem, composed by an unknown author, celebrates the heroism and benevolence of its hero Neṭumāṛaṇ, a powerful king of the Pandya dynasty. This poem is considered to be the first Kovai literature in Tamil. Today we have with us eminent scholars from 9 different countries to talk about this great book, which is going to be released by our Scholar Minister for Tamil Development, Culture and Archaeology, Honorable Thiru K. Pandya, who is instrumental for the excavation in different sites including Ciṟṛிlakkiyam, which speak volumes to the world about the glory and grandeur of the early Tamils. Now, I invite Dr. G. John Samuel, the founder director of the Institute of Asian Studies, to deliver the welcome address and introduce our guests.
Honorable Minister for Tamil Development, Culture and Archaeology, respected Professor David C. Buck, the prominent Tamilologist from US, beloved Professor Leah Comey from the US, who is going to review this book, my beloved friends Dr. Francis Muthu from the US, Dr. Alexander Dubiansky from Russia, Dr. Chandrika Subramaniam from Australia, Mr. Kumar Punithavel from Canada, Dr. Daniel Jairaj from England, Dr. Kadirvel Swarnam from Mauritius, Dr. Masakazu Kono from Japan, and Dr. Naresh Surasit from Thailand. We have for this vital book launching program a very pleasant galaxy of Tamilologists from various countries to offer their admirations and adorations to the most senior American scholar David C. Buck, who has translated into English many classics and helped a great deal for the dissemination of Tamil studies and culture all over the world. His translation of Iṛayanār Kaļaviyal, the songs of Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, the Kuttala Kuravanchi, and the present book are really invaluable contributions for the growth of Tamil studies at the global level. Translating a poem which blossomed in a particular socio-cultural milieu into another language of a different ethnic and cultural community is indeed a very Herculean job. The emotive language of poetry carries not merely its lexicographic meaning, but also the culture, the feelings, the collective experience with the multifaceted and multi-layered semantic content of a cultural group. When it is transferred to a different language with its own cultural milieu, much will be lost unless the translator fails to find out effective equivalence in the target language. That is why the English poet P.B. Shelley declared that poetry is untranslatable. But the same poet Shelley translated Plato's Symposium into English. Our national poet Rabindranath Tagore also expressed a similar view, but he translated Gitanjali from his Bengali version into English, which won him the Nobel Prize. In an age of advanced technology, global culture, and world market, the world cannot move even for a single day without translation. But what is essential in translation is the care to be taken by the translator to safeguard the original text in the source language and to do justice to the readers of the target language. Utmost fidelity to the original text should be maintained in the translated version. At the same time, it should be communicated to the reader in his own language quite spontaneously with good readability. Once this balance is lost, the purpose of a good translation will be miserably defeated. Most of the existing translations of Tamil classics, with few exceptions, are either transcreations from the reader's point of view or miserable distortions of the original text in the source language. Most of them are mere renderings in the target language, either from the commentaries or paraphrases of the original text. Consequently, large number of the existing translations of Tamil classics suffer from lack of fidelity to the original, and they remain as misrepresentations of the meaning of the source text or mere reflections of the misleading commentaries of the later ages. This is indeed a very serious threat for promoting research in Tamil at the global level. Many of our existing translations are oriented towards the readers of the target language and not towards the original source text. Consequently, they remain either as transcreations or transcompositions rather than serious translations. While speaking about மொழிபெயர்ப்பு, Tolkappiyam is having in mind transcreation as evidenced from the subsequent phrase Adarpadayathal. We can call them in Tamil as akam rather than மொழிபெயர்ப்பு. The so-called classical English version or King James version of the Bible is an example for transcreation. The English language of this version of the Bible is very poetic and beautiful, but the text in English is not completely faithful to the Hebrew or Greek originals. Consequently, this won't be very helpful to the theologians or biblical scholars who want to undertake intensive research on biblical themes. The Institute of Asian Studies has brought out translations of more than 60 rare Tamil works into English in an objective way, maintaining fidelity to the text of the source language and maintaining readability in the target language. We print the originals in Tamil text along with the translated versions and present transliterations wherever it is needed. The translators of our publications are allowed to speak only in the footnotes or endnotes and not in the text. All these books published by the Institute in this line serve as good documents for research on Tamil heritage. Published Koravanji in Kutralam, translated by Professor David C. Buck, with a very detailed introduction and with elaborate footnotes. Now, we are very much delighted to release his English version of Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai under the title The Pearl Canopy. David C. Buck's deep understanding of Tamil culture and his scholarly acquaintance with one of the great Tamil scholars, Professor K. Paramasivam, one of my good colleagues in the American College Madurai, made this publication a classic in all respects. It is a matter of great historical importance that this book is launched by our Honorable Minister for Tamil Development, who is really a champion for the cause of promoting Tamil studies at the global level. It is my great pleasure to welcome our Honorable Minister, who is instrumental for the excavations in Ciṟṛilakkiyam, an epoch-making effort in establishing the antiquity of the great Tamil heritage. I am happy to welcome to this unique event Professor David C. Buck, one of our leading Tamilologists from the United States of America, the author of this great book. Dr. Francis S. Muthu is the founder of the first Tamil Sangam in North America, the Chicago Tamil Sangam, under whose eminent leadership the 10th International Tamil Conference was organized last year in Chicago. I am happy to welcome him to this event. Professor Alexander Dubiansky is a very renowned Tamil scholar from Russia who specialized Sangam literature. His book, Ritual and Mythological Sources of Early Tamil Poetry, is an outstanding contribution to the study of classical Tamil. The commemoration volume on him, entitled Tamil Tanda Parisu, published by the Moscow State University, is a very beautiful compendium of Tamil research by various European, American, and Asian Tamil scholars from renowned centers. Dr. Leah Comio, Associate Professor of Religion in the University of Sciences, Philadelphia, is a good Tamilologist, and her book, Material Devotion in a South Indian Poetic World, is a good contribution to South Indian studies. She is now working on a very unique and interesting project on the role of flowers in the lifestyle of South Indian people. I welcome her to present a review of the book of Dr. Daniel Jairaj, Professor of World Christianity, Liverpool Hope University, is an expert in the study of German missionaries to Tranquebar, and his work on the contributions of Sigurd Balg is a rare source book for the study of the 19th century Tamil Nadu. He is also an outstanding scholar in the Hebraic and the Hellenic cultures. I am very much delighted to welcome him to this event. Dr. Chandrika Subramanian is an eminent Tamil orator, scholar, journalist, and solicitor from Australia. She organized jointly with us the 4th International Conference on Tirukkural in Sydney during last year. She is the author of many good books dealing with the great heritage of the Tamils. It is my rare privilege to welcome Dr. Chandrika Subramanian to this significant event. Mr. Kumar Punithavel from Canada is a social worker, and his services to Tamil diaspora are indeed immense. He participated in the international Tirukkural conferences organized by the Institute of Asian Studies and presented very good papers on the sacred couplets of the Tamils. It's a rare privilege for me to welcome him to this event. The three scholars, Dr. Kadirvel Swarnam from Mauritius, Dr. Naresh Surashit from Thailand, and Dr. Masaka Sukono from Japan, are the unique products of the Institute of Asian Studies. And they worked with us for their PhD studies under the University of Madras. Their contributions to Tamil studies are indeed marvelous. Dr. Kadirvel Swarnam specialized in Tamil culture in Mauritius, and he is an expert in Tamil diaspora studies. The Tamil programs conducted by him in the Mauritius Broadcasting Corporation echoed and re-echoed in the minds of the Tamils living in the islands of the Indian Ocean. Dr. Naresh Surashit is a professor of English and comparative literature in Thailand. He is also interested in the commercial and cultural context between Tamil Nadu and Siam, the present Thailand. Dr. Masaka Sukono specialized in teaching of Tamil as a foreign language through L2 method, basing on the methodology successfully adapted to teach Japanese as a foreign language. His study was highly commended by leading linguists. He continues his studies in Tokyo on the line of Professor Susumu Ano, who rendered excellent services for promoting comparative studies between Tamil and Japanese. It is my rare privilege to welcome these three good scholars to this unique event. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Samuel, for your welcome address. I now invite our Honorable Minister, Thiru K. Pandya, Minister for Tamil Development, Culture and Archaeology, to launch the book and deliver his address.
Okay, my apologies. So, dear friends, it's such a pleasure to be a part of this event. Instead of Asian studies have been uh, f- doing human service in promoting Tamil around the world. Let me first launch the book, and it's such a privilege to launch this book here, and so happy to do this. The Pearl Canopy, a very well written, a beautiful transliteration, or it's not transliteration, it's actually transcreation. I would say Dr. John Samuel mentioned about two things: translation, transliteration. I would imagine what you've done is really transcreation, which is muli akam, as Dr. Samuel said. So, phenomenal work, Dr. David Buck and Mr. Paramasivam. The combination of Madurai and US, the Western world and the Eastern world coming together to create a work of art which, in my view, has tremendous value in terms of understanding our own history, human history. And let me first thank Dr. John Samuel to have supported this project to become a reality. And let me also uh, thank the authors, Professor David Buck and Paramasivam sir, to have created this real piece of great work, I would say, number one. Number two, I think I'm also thanking the people who have come from around the world, the 9 countries from where the scholars have come to review this book and give it much needed perspective. And thank you all for coming over here. And it's a delight to address you in this Corona times, to have a trans-border kind of a literary uh, event is something to be proud of. I'm very thankful to Dr. John Samuel, especially to be in touch with my dear friend who's chairing the International Institute of Tamil Studies, Dr. Francis Muthu. To reconnect with him is a pleasure. I've seen the kind of work they've been doing from US, creating the first Tamil Sangam there. Sangam is a confluence, as we call, and the first confluence of Chicago Tamils, which he created. I had the occasion to see the way they integrated the world Tamils, 6,000 of them congregating in Chicago last year. Such a pleasure to uh, meet him again. And also Dr. Chandrika Subramaniam, whom I had the pleasure of giving a state award for Tamil, the non-resident Indians with whom we're connecting a lot more in the last 3-4 years, where we had a pleasure to meet her. And I'm also happy to welcome Professor Leah Comeau. I had spent some considerable time in Philadelphia, and the kind of work that you've been doing with India. When I was there, I saw all the temples in Tamil Nadu being kept in their archives. I was a Isunova scholar spending some time in Philadelphia, and I've seen the work that you've done to capture the heritage of India. There are temples which we didn't have a record, which we depended on the Philly archives to kind of track some of the idols. And I know the kind of seat of learning that you're coming from. Welcome, Leah, Professor Leah Comeau. And also very happy to welcome Kumar sir and Lydia from Canada. Again, we are right now getting into supporting the Toronto Tamil Chair after Harvard, and Houston. Now, Toronto, we are likely to support now coming from Canada. Welcome to both of you. I'm also happy to reconnect with Dr. Daniel Jairaj, who I met in Delhi with the Tirukkural conference. I'm very happy to meet him at that time, and the team of the evangelical team that you brought from China. It was such a pleasure to see them at that time, to see all these Chinese scholars trying to figure out Tirukkural and share some insights. Such a pleasure meeting you again, sir. And it's also a pleasure to meet Kadirvel sir from Mauritius, Dr. Kadirvel Sornam. Look forward to hearing your speech on this. With Mauritius, we set up the Tamil Poem Mayam last 2 years ago. We gave a crore, and I understand it's ready to launch now. I'm likely to be there now in Mauritius. It would be the second Tamil Poem Mayam overseas for us. And we hope that it really serves the purpose of developing Tamil in the faraway lands. And let me also pay my respects to Professor Alexander Dubyankshi. I've, really very delighted to see someone who works on Sangam literature out there in the far away cold Russia. It's so happy to see you, sir, and look forward to hear your views. And let me also look forward to hear Dr. Kono, Dr. Masakazu Kono from Tokyo. I never knew that there's so much of research happening between Japanese and Tamil. I knew about it when I went last time to Institute of Asian Studies, and he did share about the kind of work that we've been doing between Japan and India and Tamil. Very happy to welcome also Dr. Naresh Surasit, and I didn't know that we're doing so much of work with Tamil Nadu and Siam. When I was the education minister, we did sign a MOU to study the Thai language and the linkage from the eyes of school education. I had signed one with Thailand and with South Korea, and quite a bit of work is happening currently there. Welcome to you, sir, and welcome to all others, especially my dear friend who's become a bishop now, Bishop Stephen, who's also in the call. He was an HR person turned into an evangelist, so I'm also glad to welcome him. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's such a great feeling, though my name happens to be Pandya Rajan, which is the king of the Pandya dynasty. Okay, I must tell you, I mean, I have not really read a great deal of Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai. I've heard about it. You know, some of the popular movies in Tamil, one of the earlier popular movies called Ciṟṟilakkiyam, used to take one of the poetry and made that a little popular. This Konguder வாழ்க்கை அஞ்சரை தும்பி காமம் செப்பாது கண்டது முடியுமோ kind of a thing, where it's a very similar takeoff to what you have in the fourth song, which of course John Samuels has translated, and it got very popularized. Otherwise, Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai doesn't figure in any of the quote from memory in our school curriculum. Unfortunately, the school curriculum tends to veer around Tirukkural, Tiruvasakam, the elite literature, or what he would call as the big literature compared to the small literature. This is what you call as Ciṟṟilakkiyam, which would crudely be translated as small literature. But really speaking, these are extremely valuable pieces of history to my mind. I could see Villingam, for instance. Villingam is a port right now in Kerala, around whom there's a big agitation happening. India is trying to create a port to take on Colombo. Colombo is has become a major port. And Villingam, which is currently in Kerala, which at that point of time must have been under Pandya kingdom. The Pandya, Chera, Cholas, they've all had very porous borders in the 15th century history that they have straddled across the Tamil land. And it's very delightful when you see, for instance, names like Mount Podigai which I think very nicely has been captured by David Buck. Places like Kotar, places like Kungu, they're all real places currently here. And of course, the archaeological thrust that we have currently in Tamil Nadu. In the last 3 years, we've had a slightly different perspective to archaeology in Tamil Nadu. We've tried to correlate the archaeological findings with the rich Tamil literature. You know, the akam, puṟam, agananuru, purananuru kind of things, which is very rich in the Tamil in terms of even being able to give some insights into the history of Tamil. Till now, they've never attempted to weave these two things together, the archaeological finds, the literary finds, and of course, the huge amount of Kaļaviyal and Ciṟṟilakkiyam, what you call as what is etched in stone, Kaļaviyal, epigraphy, and of course, Ciṟṟilakkiyam, what's written in palm scripts, and of course, what's written in seppēdugal. Seppēdugal means what's written in copper plates. Okay, so, you know, I recently had an experience in trying to get back Leiden copper plates. Leiden is a place in Europe where some of our copper plates have found its way. Again, largely by the preachers who had come here, who had both translated them from Tamil to English at that point in time, and also some of them have reached the museums of Europe. Leiden copper plates is one such thing. So, you know, as I saw them, I could figure out that unless we are able to correlate these 5 sources of history, the literary sources, the archaeological sources, the epigraphical stuff, one written in copper plates, one written in palmyra leaves, then we get a holistic recreation of the Tamil history. That's an attempt we are making now. We have done about 187 excavations, and till now, both between us and the Tamil Nadu government and the Indian government, Archaeological Society. Now that's an attempt that we're making to, in a way, relook at the real history of Tamil Nadu, and through that window, relook at the Indian history. Frankly, this has been a very key initiative that we're taking in the Tamil Nadu government, and it's been a very exciting insights. What I could see in a brief manner when I read through the book. Of course, it's a lot tougher to recreate the lyrical flow of 8th century Tamil, as you must have known. Dr. Buck must have, and Mr. Paramasivam, I can see the struggle to get the soul of the poetry, the gist of it captured in English without sounding too limerical, at the same time trying to capture the essence of what the author is trying to say. And as you know, like many Tamil pieces of Tamil literature, the author is really unknown. There was very little we know about the person who actually wrote it, though we know Nakkiran is the one who wrote the treatise on it. So it's, you know, I was trying to see if in some sense, even in Tamil, this 8th century Tamil, half of the words are not known to the youth of today who looks at it as a normal Tamil, they will not see it. Okay, but at the same time, what is magical for the today's youth when they look at this is the Yedugai and the Monai, as they call it. The first alphabets rhyming together, and the second, third syllable, that piece of the word rhyming together, kind of a thing, which is, I think, very strong in Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, from what I read. Pūmar, Themar, Mamar, Kamar, kind of a thing. You know, I think there's some attempt the trans creators seem to have made to see the end words rhyme, the limerical component of its I's, B's, kind of a thing. I see some attempt But at some point, I see this getting given up and move on to meanings and not the lyricity of the whole thing. The layam of the poetry, they've given up and they've moved into the gist of it. Very happy to, it's very readable, very smooth, very readable. Um, it captures the essence, as Dr. John Samuel says in his introduction, of both the akam and the puṟam, the inside and the outside, which in the classical Sangam literature neatly divides into two components, akananuru, purananuru kind of thing. Here in the same poetry, you have partly the king straddling in his elephant, and the next stanza he has a chit chat with his lady love, okay, kind of a thing. So that's a little different from a normal Tamil poetry. I'm sure the Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai must have been very inspirational for the modern Tamil movies also, which seem to be filled with valor and love most of the times, and often a degenerated version of some of these poetry is what our Tamil movies tend to portray, the valor of the man and the attractiveness of the woman kind of a thing, with a lot of allegories, the allegories of speaking to the bee, speaking to the bird, speaking to, different objects and getting the message across kind of a thing. I'd really love to see some comparative literature with this. Is there things outside elsewhere, in a similar model of valor and love being in the same kind of poem? People talk about some of the earlier kings in India, especially in the Bengal side, who used to have completely, who turned into scholars and who didn't even fight, gave up their kingdom, to see their passion for literature, their passion for the work of arts. They seem to have given up even the kingdom, especially when the Britishers came here. Some of the kingdoms that they actually went as protectors were ruled by kings who were much rather, who were happier doing literary works than getting into the battlefield and fighting. There was an American movie I saw recently about the Tibet and the transition of power in Tibet. How the king there, the first priority for them was to invest in practices which are literary, artistic, and which are caring for the public people, than actually in investing in military. Okay, so it's very interesting to see in an 8th century kind of a poetry, the kind of kings who were ruling us at that point in time. Neṭumāṛaṇ is a very well-known king in the Tamil history. And to talk of Neṭumāṛaṇ with his personal profile as strongly as his public profile, it's very interesting to see this. And I think you're making a big contribution. Today, the next gen Tamils would probably learn Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai through English a lot more easily. If you're able to taste that, then probably they will learn the Tamil component of it. I know it's a little funny to say this, but the fact is today, these Ciṟṟilakkiyam, literature of the smaller aggregation kinds, need to be taken to the youth in a different way. The lyrics of it, the music of it needs to be taken to them. the 18 literary works, for instance, and the Ciṟṟilakkiyam, a host of things what we have in Tamil. We are really trying to kind of take it to the youth of today through various means. Of course, fighting against the onslaught of Anglicization, which is very, very, very dominant in Tamil Nadu. As you know, even the Tamil schools, Tamil Nadu government schools, we had to introduce a English medium class in order for students to come there. Around 46% of our students study in Tamil medium currently, and 54% actually study in English medium in Tamil. So there's an onslaught of English, which is very strong, especially in Tamil Nadu. And now with the newer language policy happening, we are trying to protect the turf of Tamil as much as we can. That's a big struggle currently. So I see the Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai work, especially the Pearl Canopy metaphor that you've taken, Dr. David Buck. I think it's a good thing. The imagery of canopy of pearls under whom sits the King Neṭumāṛaṇ, even among the youth of today, Tamil youth of today, that's a metaphor which is very new to them. It was new to me, the Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, for instance, there were kings like that who were ruling over vast terrain from Vilinjam to Mussoorie. Mussoorie is again an archaeological location now. Mussoorie Patnam. It's called Patnam in Kerala currently, which is also again part of the Pandya kingdom at some point in time. To see a Kongu as part of the Pandya kingdom is quite interesting. To see this man must have really straddled the length and breadth of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, a bit of Karnataka, a bit of Andhra currently. That seems to be a large kingdom, which you can see from the different poems that you see here. It's been very insightful for me to go through with my limited whatever learning I've had. I come to go through this a lot more and see how the next gen can actually taste a lot more of the Tamil literature, especially the Ciṟṟilakkiyam. That's my commitment as I went through the poetry of kings and lovers in ancient India is a good tagline that you've taken. And may this work flourish more and more. And may Institute of Asian Studies bring out with a lot more of this, which could take not only the literary capabilities, but also our heritage to the whole world around. And thanks for all the scholars who have committed to review this work of art. And I'd like to see many more from your cultures come into Tamil. That would be something which we commit unto thee to kind of bring a lot more of our treasures into Tamil. And as our famous poet Bharatiyar said, "Sendiduveerettathikum, Kali Chelvangal Yavum Kudadingu Serpir." What he meant was bring all the treasures of art from around the world into Tamil, almost like what Gandhi said, Mahatma Gandhi said, open your window to the world. May all winds blow through your home, is what he said, Gandhiji. So I would, as a work of transcreation, I'll welcome this in the perspective that we need to hear many cultures, we need to experience many cultures, and we need to get our culture experienced by the whole wide humanity. Thank you for the opportunity. All the best. May many works of art like Pearl Canopy enrich the mankind, sir. Best wishes to Professor David Buck and Dr. Paramasivam, and of course, Institute of Asian Studies. All the best. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for your very inspiring insights. We know how busy you are, and we are so grateful that you took out your time to be with us here this evening, and we are honored that you have launched our book today. So moving on to the book review, we have with us Professor Leah Comio, who is going to review the book, The Pearl Canopy. She is one of the leading scholars in Tamil culture from North America. Dr. Leah has many research papers to her credit, and her present project is on flower garlands for gods in Southeast India. Dr. Leah is also the author of the book Material Devotion in a South Indian Poetic World. Over to you, Dr. Leah.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Greetings, good evening, and good morning from the United States. I thank founder director Dr. John Samuel for inviting me in celebrating the book release of The Pearl Canopy, Poetry of Kings and Lovers in Ancient India. This excellent English translation of the Tamil poem Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai is a real tribute to the scholarly collaboration between Professor David Buck and the late Professor K. Paramasivam. This translation is the very welcome extension of Buck and Paramasivam's 1997 publication, The Study of Stolen Love. Depending on the interest of the reader, these two books can work in harmony with one another. They can be used as handbook, supplement, commentary, or guide. The poem translated here is Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai. Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai is the oldest surviving verses written in the genre or style known as Kōvai and sings the praises of the 8th century king Neṭumāṛaṇ. The oldest complete Kōvai poem is Manikavasakar's Tirukōvayar. Two important characteristics of all Kōvai poetry are that the poetry combines akam and puṟam themes throughout the composition, and second, every stanza or verse of the Kōvai must praise the hero of the composition. In the many Kōvai poems that proceed from this foundational text, the poems praise either a god or a supreme human leader. Of the human patrons, the Kōvai has been used to praise famous Hindu warriors, Muslim philanthropists, and even one Pondicherry Dubash named Anandarangan Pillai. In the Pearl Canopy, Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai focuses its praise on Pandya king Neṭumāṛaṇ, his conquered territories, and his victories in battle. In my review of this book, my attention was drawn in two very important movements. One is reaching back, and one is reaching forward. King Neṭumāṛaṇ provides us a lesson on reaching back, on investigating and interpreting the past. The Pearl Canopy is a wonderful composition that conveys many of the priorities and prescriptions of Sangam literature. It is a celebration of puṟam or heroic elements and is an exemplar of the various stages, tropes, and themes of early akam love poetry. Embedded in these verses, we also find a great deal of information about Tamil culture. The poet shows a deep knowledge of ecology and the botanical and environmental features of South Indian landscapes. Many verses in this poetry name local towns, villages, and cities, like Tondi city, that are significant to the political map of Tamil country under the rule of the Pandyas. Some stanzas describe weaponry, jewelry, and other items fashioned for everyday use by the hero, the heroine, the king, and his army. Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai also includes rivers, like the Vaigai River, and mountain formations, like Podiyal-Malai, by local names that provide us yet another lens or window into the world in which the poet must have been composing. We also learn about the imaginary world that the poet designed and conveyed to his or her audience, all in the name of the great patron king. All of this historical and cultural information is preserved in the Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, and all of this is also conveyed to English language audiences in the Pearl Canopy. The second feature of the Pearl Canopy that I would like to reflect on is its reach into the future. The translation work is described in the introduction by Professor Buck himself, is based on notes taken nearly 40 years ago through a partnership between renowned Tamil scholar and an American keen to learn Tamil studies. I am very pleased that this publication wisely combines the Tamil script and verse at the top of each page with the English translation below. Buck explains that the Tamil text printed in the book is adapted from Project Madurai. I am sure many here are familiar with this resource. Project Madurai was launched in 1998. Due to its digital nature, Project Madurai, much like this meeting today, is a truly global enterprise. The volunteers who developed the digital library represent many countries around the world. At last count, there are over 700 entries on their list of ancient and contemporary Tamil works. It is significant to note that these resources are free, they are paperless, they are open to scholars and the general public, and thus Project Madurai does not discriminate against anyone who has the curiosity or thirst to learn more about this Tamil language digital library. At a time of painful division between communities and countries, our gathering today, the Pearl Canopy, and each element of this production and publication are significant reminders of the great rewards possible and the intellectual necessity for us to partner with one another in new, creative, and sustaining relationships. Even before we were required to be online and virtual due to COVID-19, Dr. John Samuel and the scholars and the staff at the Institute have been supporting partnerships across national borders and encouraging the work of scholars like Professor Buck and myself. The Institute of Asian Studies maintains superb lists of publications, language learning, and now Dr. G. John Samuel is arranging wonderful events like these, and also digital venues such as his Tamil lectures on YouTube that continue to expand scholarly and public appreciation for Tamil culture and literature. I am so honored to participate in the community here on my screen, connected by email and WhatsApp, and to be part of the continuously growing network of Tamil studies. And I encourage you all to engage with and also enjoy this wonderful translation of Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai in the weeks and months ahead. It is a generous gift to Tamil studies. I wish you all safety and good health, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Leah, for your very insightful and in-depth review of the book. We are honored that you could review this book for us today. Now, moving on to the felicitations. We first have Professor Alexander Dubiansky. He is one of the leading Russian Tamilologists and is an expert in Sangam classics. He is a good speaker in Tamil. Professor Dubiansky's book, Rituals and Mythological Sources of the Early Poetry, is an invaluable contribution to advanced research on early Tamils from the perspective of a Russian Tamilologist. The volume published by the Moscow State University in commemoration of Professor Dubiansky's services for the cause of promoting Tamil studies in Russia under the title Tamil Tanda Parisu is indeed a wonderful anthology of collected research papers that will serve as source material for Tamil studies. However, due to unavoidable circumstances, he is not able to participate with us live today, but he has sent us his video felicitation, which we will see now.
என் மதிப்பிற்குரிய இந்த கூட்டத்தின் தலைவர்கள், டாக்டர் ஜான் சாமுவேல் அவர்களே, தமிழ் பேரறிஞர்களே, நண்பர்களே, உங்களுக்கு இன்றைக்கு வணக்கம் கூறுவதில் நான் மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகிறேன். மற்றும் இந்த கூட்டத்தில் கலந்து கொள்வதற்கு நான் நன்றி தெரிவிக்கிறேன். இப்பொழுது ஒரு சிறந்த நூலை பற்றி பேசுவோம். இந்த நூலை பற்றி நான் சில வார்த்தைகளை சொல்ல விரும்புகிறேன். நான் இப்பொழுது ஆங்கில மொழியில் சொல்ல விரும்புகிறேன். So dear colleagues and friends, we are now taking part in a very interesting event presenting a book of translations of a very interesting piece of literature, Tamil literature, which is, as you know, called Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai. I think that everybody in this hall knows that this is the first representative of the famous medieval genre Kōvai, and it has many, and besides it is connected with the treatise Iṟayanār Kaļaviyal, which was translated previously by Dr. David Buck, whom I want first of all to congratulate on this occasion. Well, I met once Dr. Buck, and I know his translations and his works, and it is a pleasure for me to participate in this event connected with him and connected with this wonderful piece of literature. I think that everybody who studies Tamil literature knows about this word Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, but actually it was not so well known among scholars, even though it is a very interesting and peculiar piece of literature. In fact, we know that its main feature is a connection or a combination of two major themes of Tamil poetry, that is akam and puṟam. And it is, as a puṟam poetry, it is devoted to Pandyan king Neṭumāṛaṉ and glorifying his exploits and his bravery and so on. But it is connected with the love story, so to say, which is constructed just along the rules of akam poetry, of the poetry of lyrical verses, and actually in connection with the rules which are exposed in this treatise Iṟayanār Kaļaviyal. As to me, I of course knew about this piece of poetry and even read some small parts of it, but not the whole, I must confess. And now I think that this the release of this book has a very good stimulating effect on the studies of Tamil literature. I do hope so. And as to me, I have already started thinking about it, and I found some interesting things, things which I'm going to show you just in order to show that this is really a poem worth investigating. As Dr. Buck notes in his preliminary words about this translation, this Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, it's a collection of verses, a string of verses devoted to the king, and the king, so to say, in the context of love story, of love situations. This ties between akam and puṛam Tamil poetry actually are not new, because we know that in practically in all collections of ancient Tamil poetry, I mean Kuruntohei, Načini, Ahananu, first of all, we find a lot of examples of actually panegyric elements connected with Tamil kings and chieftains, which are, so to say, incorporated in a love situation. But it seems to me that Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai is the first piece of literature which treats its connection very systematically. Its ties with previous Tamil tradition are obvious. Let me give just two small examples. For instance, the fourth verse, the fourth poem of Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, which Dr. Bach translated this way. Certain victory his enemies joined him in battle at Iṟayanār, but our king witnessed their exploits in climbing to heaven. In his grand grove here on Mount Paḍil, deep in the south, you live in your search. Tell me now, little bee. So this is actually the poem, a small poem in the genre, very well known in Tamil literature, which is called Tulu. That is a messenger poem. But what is interesting that in fact it is a paraphrase, obvious paraphrase of a famous verse in Kurun Dohei. That is the second one, Kurinje Kungu Tervaki Anjire Tumbi, addressing the Tumbi. Also Kamam separe kanda de morivo, paili de kei natpin maili siri cherve kundalin narevum ulavo ni arium puve. Actually, the context, the content of both verses is practically the same, and we can say with to be sure that these two verses are somehow connected, and actually one of them, certainly I think that the Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai is later, it belongs perhaps to 8th century, but it is based in this case, and not only in this case, but in many other cases, on the tradition of Sangam poetry. The tradition, for instance, this small poem certainly is based on the famous Iṟayanār poem from Kurun Dohei, and we can say that it is a paraphrase of this poem. In this connection, Dr. Bach notices and says about a problem which is connected with the origin of this poetry. I mean this Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai poem. And he says that it is not clear how it was composed, and he suggests, to my mind very rightly, that perhaps there was a sort of a school, and indeed this the whole set of poems in Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai reminds one sort of a scholarly or schools even exercises on chosen themes. This is a hypothesis, of course, but I think that perhaps it is true. It is a sort of experimental poetry in a way, and we know. But I want to add some tune to it. Perhaps this is not only the school of poetry which is connected, but also the competitions of poets, perhaps. So they, we know that poets of the Sangam age, Pandya, for instance, they competed on the banks of Vayi, and perhaps they had what we now call the common theme, and this theme is the main string, so to say, for different poetical compositions. Actually, we had an example of such a composition. I mean the collection called inaugurated, which also in many ways was constructed this way. Another example, also to my mind very interesting and very rich in consequences, so to say, is the also a small poem, the second poem from the Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, that is again addressing the king, but addressing this way. Virei pumpul melurei deva kol andri vintoi variurei devam kol vanurei devam kol nirmanandattirei devam kol ayam taram ittirunudale. So that is the poetical device of this, which we called ayam or acharyam, before something or some person. And immediately we recollect, first of all, the famous Tirukkural, which is constructed also on this way. Ananda kol, aymail kollo, ganan kuje, mother kol, malum yendenju. So we just try to find. We are trying to find some ties, some connections with previous literature, and so we see, and I think that further investigations will prove it, that there are connections with Tirukkural and with Purananur, of course. Again, we recollect this famous poem 49. Nadan yengo, uran yengo, padimesh panikaral svet panyengo, yangana moriho, unguval kodeye. So this is the poetical device which is used in all these, three examples, is the same. So to sum up, I'd like to say that I'm not summing up the investigation of this creation, but I just want to say that it is a very vast field of the work, of scholarly work. And I think that I'm repeating myself, that this translation, this book, will help scholars to do such work and to find some many interesting aspects of medieval Tamil literature. So I congratulate Dr. David Bach, and I recollect Dr. Paramasivam, whom I didn't meet, unfortunately, but I know about him. And I recollect the scholars from Institute of Asian Studies. And again, thank you and thank Dr. John Samuel for this invitation. And I wish all the best to all of you, and I think that this publication will be one of the vast collection of very useful and very brilliant work done in this institute. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Dubiansky, for your wonderful, enlightening speech on the book. We are so grateful for the time and effort you put into recording this wonderful video for us to see today. Dr. Chandrika Subramanian is the president of Tamil Valarchi Mandram in Australia. She is a committed Tamil scholar and solicitor who has won several laurels for her dedicated services to Tamils in Australia. She is a very good organizer of Tamil-related events and is a well-respected orator and journalist. I invite her to deliver her felicitation.
Thank you, Shiba. Honorable Minister for Tamil Development and Archaeology, Dr. John Samuel, learned colleagues, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity of meeting you all today. While I was given a very good opportunity to read this literature, the Pearl Canopy. The first thing which attracted my eyes, the Pearl Canopy, what is it? Muthu Vidhanam. That's the Tamil meaning of that, the title of that book. I looked into this book not as what it contains, because all of you spoke about it. When I got that book, first time I came across something, Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai. I did some research. It speaks about Iṟayanār Kaļaviyal and all those other stuff. But my angle, what I took, I was a journalist and a translator from my young age. Dr. John Samuel knows it very well. I took, how did he go with this translation of the ancient piece of literature? Recently, I tried to translate 108 songs from Ramayana. Ramayana is much later literature, whereas this is an ancient literature. And I went through the journey of translating a Tamil literature into English with the belief the next generation all over the world will be reading Tamil in English, because the diasporic numbers are outnumbering the Tamil readers in India. With that hope, when I was going through this literature, I could find the author has done a perfect job. First thing, when you try to read a foreign literature, it should not hurt your brain, your eyes, your thoughts. The author has done a very good job by doing a simplified version of Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai. Any translation for that matter, it should have 4 main qualities. The original meaning must not deviate from your writing. Second thing, when you translate difficult phrases and words, you should always concentrate what is the appropriate equivalent word case by case. It's not the same for one word in any literature or any other document. The third thing, you should be able to naturally read in the target language. That is, this has been translated from Tamil to English. So when you your target language is English, you should be able to naturally read without any struggle at all. The fourth thing, it should also keep an appropriate register with consistency with the original work. The author has followed all these rules while producing this recreation, as our Honorable Minister said. I call it not a translation, it's a transcreation. It's like digitally mastering Sound of Music or Karnan, because it is an existing hard, what do you say, an ancient kind of a literature and language used, whereas you are trying to make it more marketable, more approachable, more acceptable by the new audience of a different generation. The author has done a very good, a comprehensive work on this by engaging himself in comprehending the essence of the language and the concept of the work. Then he had used his style and language that is acceptable and appropriate to the date today, where we are living and reading. And he has emitted his knowledge, his language, his skills in preparing this work. Like Mr. Shankaramurthy, the late Shankaramurthy from BBC once said, translation is like transferring a glass of wine from one glass to another. Without even dropping anything out, it comes slowly. If it is 100 ml, it comes as 100 ml. The author has done a wonderful, wonderful job by taking an ancient literature and combining his skills, knowledge, and his language proficiency to create this wonderful work. And it was so impressive. I got only few songs. It is about 350 songs, I believe. And that has induced my interest to go and read the entire work. And when I started reading the English word, the words are chosen, and it is so beautifully written. and it is also very literary and poetic. Thank you very much once again for this wonderful opportunity. I wish all the best for the author. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chandrika, for your elaborate analysis of this book. We know it's late night for you in Australia, and we are really happy that you're here with us today. Thank you. We have with us Dr. Francis S. Muthu, who organized successfully the 10th World Tamil Conference in Chicago last year. He started his academic career from Loyola College in Chennai. He worked in the Faculty of Education, Loyola University, Chicago. A good scholar in the history of education, he is the author of the prestigious book, History of Education in Tamil Nadu, published by the Institute of Asian Studies. Dr. Francis is the founder of the Chicago Tamil Sangam, which has seen its golden jubilee last year. I now invite Dr. Francis to deliver his felicitation.
பெருமதிக்குரிய அமைச்சர் அவர்களே, இந்த வெளியீட்டு விழாவுக்கு வந்திருக்கின்ற அரிய பெருமக்களே, குறிப்பாக வெளியீட்டாளர் ஐயா ஜான் சாமிவேல் அவர்களே, மொழிபெயர்ப்பாளர் டேவிட் பக் அவர்களே, இந்த நூலை அறிமுகப்படுத்திய அம்மா பேராசிரியர் லியோ கோமோ அவர்களே, பிற அறிஞர்களே, நான் எப்பொழுது டேவிட் பக்கு கூட்டு பேசினாலும் தமிழ்ல பேசுங்கன்னு சொல்லுவார். ஆங்கிலத்தில் பேச வேண்டாம் அல்லது தமிங்கிலத்திலையும் பேச வேண்டாம், தமிழில் பேசுங்க என்று சொல்லுவார். அதனால் அவர்கிட்ட சொன்ன இந்த தடவை தமிழிலே பேச போகிறேன், நிறுத்தி பேசுகிறேன். இவர் நாம் அறிந்த வெளிநாட்டு தமிழ் அறிஞர்கள், குறிப்பாக வீரமாமுனிவர் திருக்குறளை அழகாக ஆங்கிலத்தில் மொழிபெயர்த்து அதற்கு உரை எழுதி, திருவாசகத்தையும் மொழிபெயர்த்து உரை எழுதி உலக புகழ்பெற்ற தமிழறிஞர் டாக்டர் ஜி போப், அவர்களுடைய தகுதி, அவருடைய நிலைமை, அவருடைய முயற்சியை ஒப்பிட்டு பார்க்கும் அளவில் இருக்கிறவர் டாக்டர் டேவிட் பக் அவர்கள். சில முறை யோசிப்பது உண்டு, ஏன் வீரமாமுனிவர் போல, ஏன் டாக்டர் ஜி போப் போல தமிழ் உலகமும் சரி அல்லது புலம்பெயர்ந்த தமிழ் உலகமும் சரி இவரை அறிந்து கொள்ளவில்லையே என்று சிலை நினைக்கும் பொழுது கவலை ஏற்படுகிறது. இவர் எனக்கு 35 ஆண்டுகளுக்கு முன்னாலே அறிமுகமானவர். சிக்காகோ தமிழ் சங்கத்தினுடைய முதல் முத்தமிழ் விழா 1984 நடந்தது. அதுதான் அமெரிக்காவில் நடந்த முதல் முத்தமிழ் விழா. இயல் இசை நாடகம், நிறைய அமெரிக்க தமிழ் மாணவர்கள் வந்தார்கள். அப்பொழுது டேவிட் பக்கும் அவருடைய நண்பர், என்னுடைய நண்பர், இவர்களும் சேர்ந்து அங்கு வந்தார்கள், அதில் கலந்து கொண்டார்கள். அப்போதான் சொன்னார், நானும் பரசும் அவர்களும் இறையனார் களவியல் உரையை மொழிபெயர்த்து கொண்டிருக்கிறோம் என்று சொன்னார். அந்த இறையனார் அகப்பொருள் யார் எழுதியது, யாரால் எழுதப்பட்டது, அதுக்கு உரை எப்படி எழுதினார்கள், யார் எழுதினார்கள் என்று சிக்கல்கள் பல இருக்கு. அதை பற்றி நம்ம ஒரு கருத்தரங்க நடத்தலாம். அது நக்கீரர் எழுதிய உரை என்று சொல்லுகிறார்கள். சங்க காலத்து நக்கீரர் வேற, இந்த உரை எழுதிய நக்கீரர் வேற. யார் அந்த 63 நூற்பாக்களை எழுதியவர்கள், இறைவன் எழுதினாரா அல்லது இறைவன் பிறரார் எழுதினார்கள் என்பதிலும் கருத்து வேறுபாடு இருக்கு. அதை பார்க்காமல் அந்த உரையை அழகான தமிழ்ல, ஆங்கிலத்துல, தமிழை நன்றாக படித்து எந்த சொல் மாற்றமும் இல்லாமல், கருத்து மாற்றமும் இல்லாமல் அழகான ஆங்கிலத்திலே மொழிபெயர்த்திருக்கிறது அவருடைய தனிப்பெரும் சிறப்பு. நான் தமிழ் குரலில் படிக்கும் பொழுது இறையனார் பொருளையே புரிந்து கொண்ட தமிழ் ஆசிரியர்கள், தமிழ் மாணவர்கள் பலர் இல்லை. புரிந்து கொள்வது ரொம்ப கடினம். அந்த கடின உரையும் அதிலே காட்டப்படுகின்ற தொல்காப்பியர், சங்க இலக்கியங்கள், பாண்டிக்கோவை என்ற நூல் அந்த அந்த பாடல்கள் எல்லாம் படித்து அந்த கருத்தை விடாமல் ஆங்கிலத்தில் மொழிபெயர்த்ததுக்கு மிக சிறப்பு. நான் அசந்து போனேன். இப்படிப்பட்ட ஒரு கடினமான நூலை உரையை படித்து அந்த உரை மாற்றமில்லாமல் ஒருவர் எழுதுவார் என்றால் அவருடைய புலமை மிக சிறந்த புலமை, தமிழ் புலமை. அது அவருடைய சிறப்பை பொறுத்தது. அது அடுத்து அவர் மொழிபெயர்த்த குற்றால குறவஞ்சி. நான் தமிழ் கல்வியில் படிக்கும் பொழுது குறவஞ்சி என்று சிற்றிலக்கியங்கள் 92 வகை சிற்றிலக்கியங்களில் குறவஞ்சி ஒன்று. குற்றால குறவஞ்சி, பெத்லேயம் குறவஞ்சி, பல குறவஞ்சிகள் உண்டு. அதே மாதிரி பாண்டிக்கோவை சிற்றிலக்கியங்கள் ஒன்று. கோவை பல கோவைகள் இருக்கின்றன. 92 வகையில பாண்டிக்கோவை ஒன்று, தஞ்சைவாணன் கோவை ஒன்று, இது பல உண்டு. ஆனா இந்த குற்றால குறவஞ்சியை நான் படிக்கும் பொழுதெல்லாம் ஏதோ அழகான பாடல்கள் நன்றாக இருக்கும், அதுல ஒன்றும் மாற்றமில்லை. ஆனால் அவர் குற்றாலத்திற்கு போய் அங்க இருக்கிற மக்கள் குறவர்கள் யார், அவர்களை படம் எடுத்து அவருடைய வாழ்க்கை முறையை ஆய்ந்து பார்த்து, இந்த குற்றால குறவஞ்சி எழுதி திரிகூட ராசப்ப கவிராயர் எப்ப இருந்தார், எங்கே வாழ்ந்தார், இந்த வரலாற்று பிடியை பார்த்து அவர் எழுதியிருக்கிற முன்னுரைகள் அதை படித்து அசந்து போனேன். உண்மையிலே அதை படிக்கின்ற வாய்ப்பு எனக்கு இப்போ அமைச்சர் அவர்கள் கலந்து கொண்ட இந்த விழாவில கருத்தரங்கில அது முடிந்த பிறகு திரும்பி வருவதற்கு இருக்கும்போது திடீர்னு கொரோனா வைரஸ்னால மூடிவிட்டார்கள், எல்லாத்தையும் எங்கேயும் போக முடியல. ஆனா எனக்கு என்ன அடைபட்டு கிடந்தாலும் கூட இந்த நூலை படிக்கிற ஒரு பெரிய வாய்ப்பு ஏற்பட்டது. அழகாக மொழிபெயர்த்திருக்கிறார். ஐயா அவருக்கு சொன்னார், அது எந்த அளவுக்கு சிறப்பாக வரவேற்கப்படுகிறது என்றால் 2ஆம் பதிவு வருகிற நிலை கூட இருக்கிறது என்று அவர் சொன்னார். அந்த நூலையும் படிக்கும் பொழுது எழுத்துக்கள், சொற்கள், அதனுடைய நாம தமிழர்கள் புரிந்து கொள்கின்ற அளவு, புலவர்கள் புரிந்து கொள்கின்ற அளவு இருக்கிற சொற்களை, ஆங்கில சொற்களை தேர்ந்தெடுத்து அழகாக மொழிபெயர்த்திருக்கிறார். இப்போ இறையனார் அகப்பொருளியில அந்த உரையில அந்த 63 நூற்பாக்கள், இந்த நூற்பாக்களை படித்தேன்னா சங்காலத்தை சேர்ந்ததாக இல்லை. நான் படிச்சு காட்டுறேன் உங்களுக்கு. அதுக்கு நக்கீரர் நிறைய தொல்காப்பியத்தில் இருந்தும் சங்க இலக்கியங்கள் இருந்தும் பிற்கால இலக்கியத்தோட சான்றுகள் கொடுக்கிறார். அப்படி இருக்கிற பிற்கால இலக்கியத்தில் பாண்டிக்கோவை. பாண்டிக்கோவை எடுத்து அகம்புறம் எப்படி கலந்து வருகிறது என்று எடுத்து காட்டுகிறார். அதை அவர்கள் மொழிபெயர்த்திருக்கிறார்கள். அதை தொடர்ந்து அந்த அதில் குறிப்பிடப்படாத மற்ற பாடல்களை எடுத்து அழகாக மொழிபெயர்த்து பாண்டிக்கோவை என்று வெளியிட்டிருக்கிறார். இதை படிக்கும் பொழுது இவ்வளவு ஆழ்ந்த தமிழறிஞர், தமிழை நன்றாக படித்தவர், வெறும் பேச்சில மட்டுமல்ல, ஏதோ சொல்லிவிடலாம், ஆனா அந்த சொல்லுக்கு என்ன பொருள், அது இலக்கியத்துல என்ன பொருள், எங்கே வருகிறது, இலக்கண மரபு என்ன, அந்த சொற்கள் எப்படி இலக்கண மரபில் மாறுகின்றன, இதையெல்லாம் பார்த்து அதனுடைய ஆழ்ந்த பொருள் வரையாமல் ஆங்கிலத்தை மொழிபெயர்க்கிறது கடினம், ரொம்ப கடினம், செய்ய முடியாத ஒரு வேலை. அதை சிறப்பாக செய்திருக்கிறவர் நம்முடைய அறிஞர் பெருமான் டேவிட் பக் அவர்கள். இவரை தமிழகத்தில் இருக்க தமிழறிஞர்களுக்கு பலருக்கு தெரியாது, வெளிநாட்டில் இருக்கிற புலம்பெயர்ந்த தமிழர்களுக்கும் பலருக்கு தெரியாது. அவரை 30 ஆண்டு காலமாக தெரிந்த நான் எனக்கு ஒரு கடமையாக கருதுகிறேன். இவரை புலம்பெயர்ந்த தமிழறிஞர்களுக்கும் தமிழ் மாணவர்களுக்கும் தமிழர்களுக்கும் அதே சமயத்தில் தமிழ்நாட்டில் இருக்க தமிழர்களுக்கும் அறிமுகப்படுத்த வேண்டும். அவர் யார், அவர் செய்த பணிகள் என்று அறிமுகப்படுத்த வேண்டும் என்று ஒரு எண்ணம் இருக்கிறது. அதனால்தான் இப்ப இந்த கூட்டத்தில் கலந்து கொள்ள சில நண்பர்கள் வந்திருக்கிறார்கள். அவர்கள் எங்களோடு இணைந்து உலக தமிழ் மாநாட்டை நடத்த ஏற்பாடு செய்தவர்கள். அவர்களும் அவருடைய நான் பேசி கொண்டிருக்கிறேன். இவர் ஐயா இங்க இருக்கிறார். உதாரணமா சொல்லுங்க, இப்ப இருக்கிற இடத்து சிக்காக தமிழ்ச்சங்கத்துல இந்த வட்டாரத்துல 20-30 தமிழ்ச்சங்கங்கள் இருக்கின்றன. அந்த தமிழ்ச்சங்களுக்கெல்லாம் கூட்டு போய் இவர் பெரிய தமிழறிஞர், தமிழ் இலக்கியங்களை ஆங்கிலத்தில் மொழிபெயர்த்திருக்கிறார் என்று அறிமுகப்படுத்தி அவரை மீண்டும் தமிழ் உலகுக்கு புலம்பெயர் தமிழர்களுக்கும் சரி, நம்முடைய தமிழ்நாட்டு தமிழர்களுக்கும் அறிமுகப்படுத்த வேண்டும் என்ற ஆர்வம் எனக்கு இருக்கிறது. அதை நாங்கள் கண்டிப்பாக செய்ய போகிறோம். கடைசியாக அவருடைய சிறப்பு பற்றி ஒரே ஒரு பாடல் மட்டும் படித்து முடித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். வாழ்த்துகிறோம். அல்லை தமிழ் இலக்கியங்கள் அனைத்துலகும் சென்றடைய ஆங்கிலத்தில் மொழிபெயர்த்து அளித்து வரும் தமிழா, நீர் புலம்பெயர் தமிழுலகமும் போற்றும் தமிழ் தாயுலகமும் நலமுடன் பாராட்டி நன்றி பல கூறி வளமுடன் வாழ்க என வாழ்த்துகிறோம். கவிஞர் முத்தரசன். அது என்னுடைய கவிதை. இந்த கவிதை தான் நான் தமிழ் படிக்க போனேன். சின்ன வயசுல இருந்து கவிதை எழுது கொண்டு அதை வைத்துக் கொண்டு தான் வீரசேர மடத்துல போயிட்டு தமிழ் இலக்கியம் பயின்று அதன் பிறகு மற்றவர்கிட்ட கத்துங்க வர வேண்டியிருந்தது. ஆக தமிழ் நாம் சொல்ல வேண்டியது, தமிழ் பழமையான ஒரு மொழி. அந்த மொழியினுடைய வளம், அந்த மொழியினுடைய பண்பாட்டு கூறுகள், இதை நாம் விட்டுவிட முடியாது. அது எப்படி கட்டிக்காக வேண்டும். இந்த மாதிரி அறிஞர்களை போற்றுவதன் மூலமாகவும் இந்த அறிஞர்களுடைய எழுத்துக்களை உலகுக்கு அறிவிக்கும் மூலமாகவும் நாம் கட்டி காக்கலாம் என்று கூறி ஐயா அவர்களுக்கு நன்றி சொல்லி வணக்கம். எல்லோருக்கும் நன்றி. வணக்கம்.
Thank you, Dr. Francis, for your very enlightening speech and review. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Naresh Surasit, who is here with us from Thailand. Dr. Naresh is our active representative for Southeast Asia, a professor of English and comparative literature. He is the author of 65 books in English. He is very much interested in the study of the trade link between Tamil Nadu and Thai in the early and Middle Ages. I invite Dr. Naresh to offer his felicitation.
Honorable Minister of Development, if I don't make any mistake.
No, you didn't. Perfectly fine.
Dr. John Samuel, Dr. David C. Buck, Professor Paramasivam, and distinguished guests. Good evening from Bangkok, from Thailand. It is immense pride and privilege for me to be invited to participate in the virtual launching of the book entitled Pearl Canopy, which is an English translation of the 8th century Tamil classical work, celebrating the great king and warrior of Pandya dynasty. The original work, as I learned from my supervisor, Dr. John Samuel, was translated into English by Professor David C. Buck and Professor K. Paramasivam. As a former PhD student in literature, but not focusing on Tamil literature, but at the same time, I was nurtured and I was impressed by my supervisor, his family. And as the former PhD student in literature at the Institute of Asian Studies under the supervision of Dr. John Samuel, I was really proud of my former institution and my supervisor for organizing this significant event like this. It reminds me of the time when I was studying in India. I studied my MA in Mysore for 2 years, and then PhD 5 years under the supervision of Dr. John Samuel. So this is really a significant moment that I have to say congratulations to both the translators and my organizer, my institution, Dr. John's institution. Even I didn't study this Tamil literature, but I had learned and experienced the uniqueness of Tamil culture and literature through the people and the text in Chennai. The institution itself has continually published many important literary works, which are available both in India and some other countries. At the same time, I'm sure that the priceless work will be available in Thailand. I mean, this book, the translation copy, English copy, will be available in my country, Thailand. Professor Dr. John Samuel was very kind to me and always kind to me when I was his PhD student. And he visited Thailand many times and delivered attractive speeches at Ciṟṟilakkiyam Buddhist University, the university that I taught for more than 20 years, both in high educational level, like PhD and MA classes. And at the same time, he also participated and delivered a significant speech about trade and cultural ties between Thailand and Tamil Nadu. Thailand known as Siam and Tamil Nadu at Southeast Asia University, the university that I worked for more than 15 years as the Dean of Faculty of Arts and Science. So my country, my previous country was, is Siam. It is very much fascinating to know about the close Indo-Thai relationship in the Middle Age, especially the close unbroken tie between Siam and Tamil Nadu for many centuries. The most significant tie between the two countries that I must mention here is through Buddhism, as we know that Buddhism originated in India. We Thai people use Buddhism to link between the two countries, and the literature also we receive from various areas from India, also available in our country and adjust to our literature, like Ramayana also here available, and many significant works also. So Buddhism links the two countries together. We Thai people consider it the greatest heritage that Indian people gave to Thailand, or Thai people. This is the unbroken tie between India and Thailand, and I believe the tie between the two countries will last forever. I congratulate Professor David C. Buck, Dr. David C. Buck, and Professor K. Rama Paramasivam, who have jointly translated many Tamil classical texts into English. And I would like to congratulate my supervisor, Professor Dr. John Samuel, to organize such an important event like this. Thank you for inviting me to deliver the speech in this significant event like this. And I am sure that this work will help to promote the greatness of Tamil literature beyond the frontiers of Tamil India, crossing all the barriers and present it to the wider international scholarship, especially in my country, Thailand. Congratulations again, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Naresh, for your excellent presentation. We are enthralled by your research between the cultures of Tamil Nadu and Thailand. We are sure your efforts would bring these countries closer. I would now like to invite Dr. Masakazu Kono, a good Tamil linguist from Japan. He studied applied linguistics from Australia and did his PhD in the Institute of Asian Studies. This scholar from Tokyo specializes in the grammatical similarities between Tamil and Japanese. I invite Dr. Kono to offer his felicitation.
Greetings for everyone. I am Masakazu Kono from Japan. I'm pleased to express my felicitation for this virtual book launching. First of all, I'd like to start with my study background. I was extremely interested in learning Tamil when I was in Singapore. After that, I came to Chennai and became a PhD student at Institute of Asian Studies. During that period, I undertook a comparative study between Tamil and Japanese. According to my study, I understand that Japanese culture is closely linked with Tamil culture in several ways. Because of rice culture transition from India to East Asia, some similarities are pointed out between the Pongal festival and some other festivals in Japan. In addition, Japan became much closer to India by the prevalence of Mahayana Buddhism. That also includes the influence of Sanskrit and Bodhidharma. As a result, there are numerous songs and games for children related to Bodhidharma in Japan. In this reason, most Japanese are familiar with these influences without knowing. As far as the language similarities between Tamil and Japanese is concerned, both languages belong to the same language family. Therefore, the two languages show some similarities, including the sentence structures, verb formations, verb groups, etc. In regard to the book, The Pearl Canopy, I'd like to make a few remarks. This is a great book with a beautiful cover page. The language is carefully selected for the translation. While I was reading the introduction of the book, I recalled the unique concept of inner and outer among Tamil poems. I knew that the same concept can be applied to the Japanese traditional poems as well. Finally, it is sure that this publication is essential for non-Tamil readers to experience the sweetness of Tamil tradition. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great.
Thank you, Dr. Kono, for your very good review of the book. I would now like to invite Dr. Sornam from Mauritius to offer his felicitation. Dr. Kaļaviyal Sornam is noted for his Tamil programs in the radio and television of the Mauritius Broadcasting Corporation. He is in fact a cultural ambassador between Mauritius and Tamil Nadu. His intensive study of Tamil culture in Mauritius won him the prestigious PhD title. I now invite Dr. Sornam to offer his felicitation.
Honorable Uyathiru K. Pandya, Minister of Tamil Development, Culture and Archaeology, Government of Tamil Nadu. Respected Dr. John Samuel, Founder Director, Institute of Asian Studies, Chennai. Professor David C. Buck, Associate Professor, Emeritus, Elizabethtown College, Kentucky, USA. Professor Leah Konu, Associate Professor of Religion, University of the Science, Philadelphia. Dr. Francis Muthu, Chairman, International Institute of Tamil Culture, United States of America. Professor Alexander Debiansky, Moscow State University, Russian Federation. Dr. Chandrika Subramanian, President of Tamil Valachi Mandram, Australia. Mr. Kumar Punidavil, Social Worker from Canada. Dr. Daniel J. Raj, Professor of World Christianity, Liverpool Hope University, England. Dr. Masakuzu Kono, a specialist in language teaching, Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Naresh Surasit, Professor of English and Comparative Literature, Thailand. Distinguished Tamil scholars and non-Tamilians from different countries. Members of the audience who are following this virtual event online. Ladies and gentlemen, my heartiest Vanakkam. Good afternoon, bonsoir to all of you. I am extremely happy to be among the participants in this webinar whom I met in different international conferences and seminars. I even met the Honorable Minister in Chennai this year, in the month of February. Now, I'm going to introduce myself. I am a Tamil origin of Mauritius. My forebears were from the district of Tanjavur, Tamil Nadu. They settled here in Mauritius in the year 1884 to work as endangered laborers. I belong to the fourth generation of my descendants. I had my primary and secondary education in Mauritius, followed by my higher education in Tamil Nadu, Madras University in particular. I taught Tamil at primary, secondary, and tertiary level in my motherland. I served the Mauritius Broadcasting Corporation as a freelance Tamil presenter, a full-time producer, and senior producer for more than 40 years. Now I am fully involved in translation, transcreation, and transliteration of Tamil prayers, devotional songs into English, French, and Creole, our dialect here in Mauritius. It is my bounden duty to thank the dynamic director of IES, Dr. John Samuel, for having given me an opportunity to participate in this webinar today on the occasion of the virtual launching of the book, The Pearl Canopy, by Professor David C. Buck and Professor K. Paramasivam. My close association with IS during my training courses at the All India Radio and at the DDK in Chennai, now known as Podigay. At that very time, I visited the Institute of Asian Studies. It was in the year 1985, 3 years after the establishment of IES. I was very, very much impressed by the objectives of the Institute, such as undertaking research on Tamil heritage with a wider Asian perspective in collaboration with scholars from different countries. Studying systematically the composite culture of Asia, promoting better understanding on the homogeneity in Asian culture. Afterwards, whenever I go to Chennai, I never fail to visit the Institute and buy valuable books on regional cultures and Tamil literatures, translated into English, published by the IS. At the same time, I would seize the opportunity to spend some fruitful times with foreign students studying Tamil under the guidance of Dr. John Samuel and Mrs. Indira Samuel. Today, I am proud to say that I had been lucky to have Dr. John Samuel as my guide for my research study, leading to my PhD degree through Madras University. It's pride for me to be a product of a reputed institution like the IS. Dr. John Samuel mentioned it in his introductory speech. He mentioned my name as a product of IS. As the IS has academic collaboration with the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Mauritius, the director of IS, Dr. John Samuel, was called to serve as external examiner for BA and diploma examinations conducted by the University of Mauritius and Mahatma Gandhi Institute. The IAS organized the second international conference on Murugan, first international conference on Tamil diaspora, and an international conference on Tirukkural in Mauritius, with other famous institutions in Mauritius, which were very, very successful. Today, it gives me an immense pleasure to participate and voice my feeling as a token of felicitation to Professor David C. Buck, and who is a non-Tamil scholar, and Professor K. Paramasivam, a great Tamil scholar, for the book, The Pearl Canopy, a translation of the 8th century Tamil classical work, Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, from Tamil into English. Translation helps to open the windows of knowledge through which we can get a fair view of the flavor of other languages. The immortal poet Subramanya Bharatiyar made a strong appeal to the Tamil scholars to translate valuable books, that means Tamil books, into various foreign languages and share them to the world, so that the ancient grandeur and purity of Tamil literatures, beauty and purity of Tamil language be known to non-Tamils outside the Tamil land. 53 years back, in his Annamalai convocation address, Perarinyar Anna had kindly requested the new graduates to undertake the special task of carrying the message that our Tamil classics contain to the entire world in order to acquaint the non-Tamils with the value of Tamil language and literature. I strongly believe that both translators, Professor Buck and the great noble soul, Professor Paramasivam, have realized the dream of those great thinkers. I would like to mention that I came to know that Professor K. Paramasivam, who has contributed immensely in the bringing out in English remarkable works in various fields related to Tamil heritage, was the teacher of Dr. David Buck, who did the excellent translation of Kutrala Kuravanji, a Tamil tale of love and fortunes told, which confirms his high proficiency in Tamil language, Tamil culture, music, and philosophy. It is worth to know that his translation is helping Tamil students of Mauritius studying Kutrala Kuravanji among their subjects. The English translation of the Pearl Canopy is an outstanding work undertaken jointly by Dr. Buck, an ardent lover of Tamil, and Professor K. Paramasivam. After having gone through all the stanzas of the Tamil classic Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, both of them wished to share the lasting pleasure they enjoyed to foreign Tamilians through English. This arduous task was done with dedication, affection, and not for glorification. I can imagine the quantum of work and patience put by the translators to complete this masterpiece. Their aim was to show the world the aesthetical beauty of Tamil poetry. The use of simple English in the translation is praiseworthy. The flow of the language is marvelous. My joy knows no bound. When I started to read the first stanza, I took her 2 eyes like blossoms to be honeybees, her 2 young breasts to be flower buds, her scarlet mouth, I like honey to be the bud of a leaf. It's merely an avant-goût. I'm fully confident that the readers of the book, The Pearl Canopy, will enjoy its content with keen interest. I wish to express my deepest felicitation to the translators for this laudable work done by them. My sincere appreciation goes to them for having offered this marvelous piece of work as an imperishable material to enable the reader, Eastern or Western, to understand and appreciate the beauty of Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai. My fervent wish is that Mother Tamil shower her bountiful blessings on Dr. David Bug to live a long life so that the non-Tamils around the globe can benefit more by other similar projects to follow in the project with the collaboration of the Institute of Asian Studies. I can say that here in Mauritius, most of our Tamil students, they used to read books translated in English or French to understand the beauty of Tamil. Today, I would like to say that I have started to study Tamil through English translation. Books prepared by Father Kerslake, published by the Madras Christian Literary Circle. These books have helped us to study and go deeply in Tamil education. Once more, I would like to congratulate Dr. David Bug, whom I met in international conferences, and most of the participants here, I met them, I talked to them, and I hope that, as the minister just mentioned, that we will have to do some human services, some good work to promote Tamil, and we will do our level best for the promotion, preservation, and propagation of that great and ancient language known as Tamil. With these words, once more, I would like to thank everybody who have listened to my feeling, and I wish Dr. Bug to go for a long distance in the creation of more materials to help non-Tamilians to study Tamil. I'd like to thank all of you once more for your attention. Vanakkam.
Thank you, Dr. Swarnam, for your in-depth analysis of the book. Your presentation touched so many critical areas, and we are so happy to have had you here today. Now, I'd like to welcome Mr. Kumar Punithavel, a lover of Tamil heritage from Canada and a committed social activist and philanthropist among the Tamil community there. He is an important member of the Canadian Tamil diaspora who participated in the international conferences on Tirukkural organized by the Institute of Asian Studies in India and England. I now invite Mr. Kumar Punithavel.
Vanakkam, founder director of Institute of Asian Studies, Dr. John Samuel, Honorable Thiru K. Pandirajan, Professor David C. Buck, and other fellow speakers. First of all, let me thank you for giving me an opportunity to join these elite, knowledgeable Tamil scholars. It was a scholar, Canadian scholar. Actually, this is the bicentennial year for that great scholar, a Canadian scholar, maybe the first Tamil scholar, Reverend U.G. Pope, who wrote in his book, in his translation, Naladiya, I am not without a hope and believe that such editions of their great classics may find favor with some at least of the great multitude of young Tamil men who pursue with enthusiasm and fair success of their English studies, but are, I apprehend, in some danger, alas, of neglecting their own wonderful language. His word has come true, what Reverend Pope said. His translation of Tirukkural. Because he translated Tirukkural into English, the famous writer Leo Tolstoy from Russia was able to read. And because of that, he wrote the book, Kingdom of Heaven is Within. And he also wrote a letter to a Hindu. On it, he quoted so many Tirukkural, but he of course gave the name as Hindu Kural. And that certainly had an impact on a great fighter, Mahatma Gandhi. They were pen friends for a short time. At the end of it, Gandhi was so much taken up on Tirukkural, so much so he said he would like to learn Tamil so that he can read Tirukkural. He read Reverend U.G. Pope's translation. Now, this is very relevant what we are doing, and especially I must thank Professor David C. Buck from the bottom of my heart. Sir, it was in the 80s, so many Tamils, not one or two, in thousands flew out of their homeland due to the communal violence. They were like, they got scattered all over the world. In Canada, in New Zealand, in Netherlands, in Australia, all parts of the world, we moved out. At that time, we didn't have a chance to teach our children our rich heritage, as he clearly said, of neglecting their own wonderful language. We were forced to neglect. We couldn't, because we were fighting the survival game. But now they all want to know, and believe me, everyone wants to know the roots. At one stage in their life, they will all want to find their roots. And your work here in translating will give them that opportunity, will give them that chance to learn this wonderful language and the rich heritage, not only ethics, even valor, even love, compassion, all these things are well expressed in our literature. And your translation of Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai certainly has done a great service. It is the great Tamil poet who was a scholar in about 14 languages. Bharadiyar, in his poem, Yamarinda Moliyalலே says, மறைவாக நமக்குள்ளே பழங்கதைகள் சொல்வதிலோர் மகிமை இல்லை, திறமான புலமையெனில் வெளிநாட்டோர் அதை வணக்கம் செய்தல் வேண்டும். Yes, your translation make others to realize, wow, what a wonderful literature this is. Let's go and find further in and study. So you have done a wonderful service, and I must certainly congratulate Dr. John Samuel taking the trouble and initiative as a founder director of Institute of Asian Studies in participating in promoting to publish books like Pearl Canopy. it comes out so well. The translation is so well done. One day, my great-grandchild can enjoy it. Else, they are not going to study. Even, to be honest, even the first generation find it difficult to analyze the Sangam literature. They are wonderful, but so many words have lost, it has out of use. But you have taken the trouble and done, both of you. I must thank both of you from the bottom of my heart, Professor David C. Buck and also Professor K. Paramasivam, who have taken the trouble. I mean, it's a magnanimous thing you have done for Mother Tamil. And I am sure each and every Tamil will be thankful for the efforts you are doing in translating these books. Once again, let me thank the opportunity given to me to participate and tell you from the bottom of my heart, this is a wonderful job and more of it should come and better for the humanity. Thank you. Vanakkam.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar Punithavel, for your wonderful appreciations for this book. I would now like to invite Dr. Daniel Jairaj, who is the Professor of World Christianity at Liverpool Hope University. A good theologian, his contribution to the study of German missionaries to Tamil Nadu is indeed marvelous. He is also a good scholar in Hellenic and Hebraic cultural traditions. He has edited some of the important Tamil writings of the Lutheran missionary Ziegenbalg, and one such work was published by the Institute of Asian Studies. He was also the coordinator for the Second International Conference of Tirukkural held in Liverpool in 2018. I now invite Dr. Daniel Jairaj. Dr. Daniel Jairaj, can you unmute yourself, please?
மாண்புமிகு அமைச்சர் திரு பாண்டியராஜன் ஐயா அவர்களே, உங்களுக்கும் திரு ஜான் சாமுவேல் ஐயா அவர்களுக்கும் மற்றும் என்னோடு பேசிய பேச்சாளர் ஒவ்வொருவருக்கும் என்னுடைய சிரம் தாழ்த்தி நன்றிகளை நான் தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். முதலாவது என்னுடைய பல்கலைக்கழகத்தின் சார்பாக உங்களுக்கு என்னுடைய வாழ்த்துக்களை நான் தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். நான் இந்த முழு பேச்சையுமே தமிழில் தான் தயாரித்து வைத்திருந்தேன். ஆனால் சூழ்நிலைகளை பார்க்கும்போது கலந்து பேசுவதுதான் நல்லது என்று எனக்கு தோன்றுகிறது. So I thought I would do that in under three short headings. First, I would like to say who I am a little bit so that you can put me in the context. Second, I would like to put this particular work, the translation, into much wider context. We are talking about the 20th century translation, but Tamil translation into European languages is more than 310 years. I would just give a little bit of that dynamic that is going on. We are participating in a 300-year heritage, this particular event. And finally, few comments about this particular book and its worth. About me, I am the son of Pallangi. Pallangi is a small village in the Kodaikanal hills and near Madurai. And that was the place I was born. By training, I was a coolie worker. You may not remember that, but that is the one that trained me for all my academic job later on. Even the Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, when I read certain poems, I remember my own good old days in the village life. That's what people used to do. Love affairs in normal life settings, fantastic poems that just reminds me a lot. But at present, I was hearing how to create intercultural understanding as a Tamilian. That was my great depth. But my father passed away. I had to join an orphanage. In that orphanage, I was introduced to German language. And slowly I began to study German literature. So after finishing my theological studies, I went to Germany to do my first doctorate. By chance, as we were just walking in an archives, I saw a bundle covered with newspapers. I pulled out that one. To my surprise, they were palm leaf documents tucked under a shelf, about 160 different voluntary volumes. And that really provoked my interest to study more. So for my second doctorate, again in Germany, I took Tamil religions, Saivism, Vaishnavism, and Shaktiism. Again, it was a document written by Ciṟṟilakkiyam. I discovered this manuscript in Copenhagen. And he cited many Tamil works. See, I longed to study Tamil literature, but I never had a chance. But I studied German literature. But through German literature, I came to the study of Tamil. I wanted to find out the accuracy of citations in these books. In that way, I came across the first Tamil library, the first Indian public library established in India. That is 1708 in Tranquebar, with 119 Tamil works that we know, the Bibliotheca Damolica. I was fascinated by that one. And my third one, I thought, okay, all the time we are thinking the Germans came and influenced Tamil people. Are Tamil people inferior to these Germans? So what did Tamil people do in order to influence German thinking? Wow. I came across 3 translations done in 1708. Ulaga Neevi, Kondrai Vendan, Neevi Venba. So I took Ulaga Neevi as my doctoral subject that I completed for German studies in the University of Bombay. How it impacted the thinking pattern of Germans who were coming in touch with them. But now, after working in the United States for a few years, now I'm here in Liverpool Hope University. I teach Christianity in Africa and Asia primarily, but I also supervise the research ethics of the entire university. So I supervise them and train my colleagues and senior students in different way of doing research ethics and keeping ethical code of conduct. That's roughly about me. So I am a latecomer to Tamil studies, but I really revel in it, enjoy it. Second point, the much bigger context. What motivated the Germans to translate Tamil works into German? Well, in those days, when I say in those days, it was 1705, when Ciṟṟilakkiyam and Puļichau, 2 young students of theology coming to Tranquebar, they were given the advice, particularly people who knew them. You are going to Tamil Nadu. Remember, you are going to barbarians, uncivilized people who do not know how to live a civil life. That was the orientation they got. But when they landed in Tamil Nadu and began to do their work, it was necessary for them to learn Tamil and learn Tamil literature. That completely changed their opinion. So in the foreword for Neevi Venba in 1708, Ciṟṟilakkiyam writes, because Europeans do not know what Tamil people have written and how they live and what they speak, they have wrong prejudices, and I need to somehow remove that prejudice and biases from them so that intercultural exchange of ideas can really take place. These Europeans were not merely in Germany or in Europe, but they were in Tamil Nadu itself. So for their sake, he translated Neevi Venba, Kondrai Vendan, and Ulaga Neevi. These 3 ethical works created so much impression. Mind you, so began to print Tamil alphabets. First time in 1708 in Berlin and 1710 in Leipzig. Leipzig is the city of books. And 1709 in London. What did the people think? They thought, wow, so far we have been knowing only knowledge comes from the study of Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. But now they're having an opportunity to know about knowledge coming from Tamil, which they think is as equally classic, equally valid. The impression they got was, okay, Tamil is worthy of translating the Bible into that message. That really impressed them so much. So there were some students who were interested to study. So in 1711, Tamil was for the first time taught in Europe, officially. 1711 by two people. One, the first Tamil man, the Tamil teacher was Timothy Kudiyan from Tranquebar, and his German colleague was Henrik Fluchau. One of the local professors joined, Michael Benedictus Michaelis, that was his name, and the printer of mission reports, Ehlers, was his student. So through their effort, Tamil ideas were kept on alive in the German settings for nearly 40 years. Then a missionary by name Benjamin Schulze, who was working in the near Black Town, what we call now Paris Corner in Chennai, and Vepari later on, he went to Germany and took with him a lot of Tamil manuscripts, and he was beginning to print these manuscripts over there. And who was his student? Christian Friedrich Schwarz was his Tamil student. So even before he came to India, he learned Tamil there and came to work in Tranquebar, Tanjavur, Trichy. And when I was speaking with the late senior prince of Royal House, Tanjavur, he told me he is our savior because he was the one who took care of Saraboji when Tulaji king entrusted to him. Thus he saved, so to say, the whole place, Tanjavur, from bloodshed for a very good period. So the tradition, Dr. Buck, Professor Buck, what you are doing comes in the long tradition of Tamils and non-Tamils trying to take out the wealth of Tamil literature and bringing it elsewhere. Now let me come to the third point, just giving some brief ideas about what I have noticed. It is a labor of love. Thank you for persisting in this work. I have been trying to translate some of the German scripts into English. I did 4 of them. One is Tamil Society. You know, the German title is called Malabarisches Heidentum. When I read about that word Heidentum, I got goosebumps. I thought, who are these Germans to call me a heathen? I said, I will never back down to that motive. So I had to find out. I simply said Tamil Society. That's how I translated. A lot of critics came. You should have said heathenism. I said, you have no right to call me a heathen. But it means the translation that you have done shows you how much you are embedded in both cultures. In English culture, particularly in the American culture, using American English, and reading Tamil and Tamil culture, so you are at home in both, so that you are able to build bridges. Secondly, I translated religious texts. Shaivism, Vaishnavism, it is not easy finding equivalent words. Then there are 99 letters that Tamil scholars wrote to the Europeans telling about Tamil society. So I translated them from German into Tamil, finding the names, finding the pronunciation of things. It is not at all easy task to find equivalents. But the thing that posed me the greatest difficulty is the Tamil grammar. You know, the first Tamil Latin grammar was printed in Germany in 1716, 1716. And it was a Tamil man by name Peter Malayappan. He was the one who took care of that editing. Ziegenbalg is attributed to have written it, but my research tells me that he has borrowed it from Hendrix from Thoothukudi. It was what was in Portuguese, he translated into Latin. I found it very tough to translate it from Latin into Tamil, but now it is done. It's available for people to read since 2010. All this translation, my experience tells me the joy and the challenges of word-to-word translation are dynamic equivalents. What is better? What is more accurate? Sir, you have used both aspects in your work. There are certain phrases which are word to word, particularly when it comes to the body parts and also the landscape in which this particular poem, Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, is situated. Word-to-word translations are there. But you have captured, so to say, the essence or the nature or the basic concepts of Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai and given it in very good American English. Thank you so much for that one. So it's a dynamic equivalence, both principles you have mastered. But thank you also for maintaining the curiosity over such a long period of time, because only people like you are cultural translators. You can build bridges, particularly in our modern times, when governments, whether it's American government, European governments, are trying to build walls between people, and works like you helps them to transcend these kind of walls and creates much better understanding. As I said, as I was going through some of the translations, I was reminded of the village life in the Kodaikanal hills. It is not far from Madurai, it's only a few hours journey. It was written, so to say, the king may have lived in a city, but the love affairs these people have reflects the village life in all purity and in all complexity. It reminds me very much. In other words, your translation has made Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai alive for people who can identify with themselves with the Tamil world and also in a translated sense elsewhere. So I want to thank you. I also thank you for the late Professor Paramasivam for what he has done. I never had an opportunity to hear his name before, but may the work that you are doing continue. Finally, my gratitude to Dr. John Samuel. It was in relation to the publication of one of my palm leaf manuscripts, I came to him. But ever since, I feel deeply attached to you, sir, and to your institution. From you, I know the importance of Sandron. You are the first one to tell me what it means to be a Sandron. You know, I try to use that in my ethical training in my university. I try to inculcate into my students, young colleagues, and whenever I give ethical training, that somehow influences me. Try to be a Sandron in whatever you do in high-level research work. Then you taught me about Murugan worship. I don't know whether you remember it. But it came like a Pentecostalism for me when you were telling about that one. Maybe I remarked that. In other words, whatever our ancestors have done, you have tried to embody it through your institution by creating documents for that, by enthusing people. Thank you very much. And finally, just that bringing that Tirukkural conference to Liverpool was not an easy work, but together with your help and blessing, we could conduct that. And still my colleagues, those who were here at that time, speak about it. It was a great opportunity to highlight some parts of Tamil culture here. I feel very proud to represent Tamil Nadu in my university here and take Tamil culture forward. Thank you, sir, for incorporating me into this great audience, and I am grateful for everyone. Nandri, Vanakkam.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel Jayaraj, for your very informative and enlightening presentation. I would now like to welcome the author of this wonderful translation, Professor David C. Buck, the world-renowned Tamil scholar from North America, who is praised for his attractive English renderings of many of our classic literature, to come and deliver his acceptance speech.
Can you hear me? It's not mute.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. பெரியோர்களே, Anbargale, Nanbargale, Taimargale, and as we draw it out from Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai itself, Tan Tamalinavi Pol Arindargale, Vanakkam. It is indeed an honor beyond anything I had ever expected to be brought into a gathering such as this book launch. My humble thanks to Dr. G. John Samuel and all of the other people who have worked to bring this occasion to reality. I gratefully accept the joyous hopes and wishes that go with this occasion, remembering throughout the indisputable fact that the late Dr. Ku Paramasivam was the person who laid out the bedrock and built the road that was followed in completing this translation of the ancient Tamil classic Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai, for which we have selected the title, The Pearl Canopy, hoping to bring to mind the regal splendor and the pure pearly beauty of these collected poetic Ciṟṛilas. Here is poem number 103, which contains one of the poetic references to the Pearl Canopy, the Muthukkudai, that shaded the seat of the Pandyan kings. Go on, don't stop here on the rich and beautiful slopes of these Kolli mountains that belong to him who stood for all the people of this wide world to worship. The king with the canopy of glistening pearls, whose bow engaged and destroyed combatants who would not embrace him at Neṭumāṛaṇ. This terraced field is watched. And I wish to close my very short acceptance speech with one last translated Ciṟṛi, one that brings in the Brahminical Lord Shiva as well as the pearls of status and the doubling up of akam and puṟam themes. This is number 212 in Pāṇṭi-k-Kōvai. We must agree and accept this offer according to social custom, for if we do not, the whole world of the Supreme One, him whose ancestor is the cool rayed moon, held in the matted locks of him who wears fresh laburnum, of the emperor with the white canopy of cool pearls, of him whose army triumphed at Neṭumāṛaṇ. Even that whole world would never be price enough for this girl with her brilliant forehead. So all in all, I am grateful to find myself in the position of accepting this opportunity through this translation to do my heartfelt little bit for Tamil. Thank you, Tamil scholars and other interested people. Vanakkam.
Thank you, Dr. Buck. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Buck, for your speech. We are indebted to you for having provided to us this wonderful translation. We have now come to the concluding part of this webinar. It is time to extend our heartfelt thanks to all our guests and viewers. We are grateful to our Honorable Minister for having taken time out of his busy schedule and being with us this entire evening. We are grateful for our participants from various parts of the world for your kind cooperation which you have extended to this collective effort for a common cause of promoting Tamil studies at a wide global perspective. We are sure, with all your support and patronage, we could take up more and more projects which will go a long way in strengthening Tamil studies at a global level. Engal Vazhvum, Engal Valamum, Mangada Tamilendru Sange Murangu. Again, thank you all for your participation, and we hope this is the first of many to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much.